Kaulana Na Pua o Hawaii Tupama hope o kaina Hiki mai ka elele o ka loko ino Pala pala anunu me ka paka Kaulana Na Pua o Hawaii
Okay, aloha mai kākou. Mahalo nui for being here, everybody. My name is Le'ala Okuda, graduate assistant at UH Manoa's Educational Administration Program. I'm from Kapolei, Oahu, but my ancestral land is Punalu'u. I am Kanako Oiwi, Japanese, and Okinawan, so I find myself tracing my people's lineage through social movements. And the reason why I feel this deep kuleana towards Kokua Hawaii is because of how much I've become politicized through this learning process. Ikawama mua, ikawama hope, when looking to the past, we can inform the present and future. With that said, I'm honored to be co-hosting this event today alongside my mentor and co-organizer, Ethan Chang.
Thank you, Leala. And before we begin, it should be noted that Leala created the beautiful flyer that you all saw, and she did this amid writing her finals. So I think if Dr. Reyes is in the house today, know that Leala is actively doing an event as she's writing her final paper. But thank you, Leala, and echoing your gratitude and excitement for being here. I'm Ethan, an assistant professor and community-based researcher in the College of Ed. I study how people learn, how people develop new practices and new identities as leaders, and also build solidarities to work across differences. As a non-Kanaka, I'm seeking to struggle and to be in struggle. And reading the oral histories of Kokua Hawaii activists that Gary Kubota put together, that was one way for me to begin doing the homework, right? To study and to listen. And Leala and I know we both have been so grateful to share space with Kokua Hawaii activists over the past year or so. And today to be invited to play a small part in facilitating today's conversation. But before we get any further, it's not too late. Go ahead and send this invite, call up the aunties and uncles, your grandma and grandpa, get the keiki and the kids all together, because we have an amazing group of panelists here today. Amazing, brilliant group of organic intellectuals. They're gonna share their knowledge with us. And we're gonna have a great time. Now we're gonna spend some time learning, singing, growing. And of course, none of this would be possible without our university relations.
Yes, so we want to shout out Aiko Yamashiro and Hawaii Council for the Humanities, and Team Miki Hui Hui of Hawaii People's Fund, and also wanted to mahalo Kahuna Vai Wright for helping build that pilina with them. Dr. Tai Tengen of Ethnic Studies Department, and Dr. Daviana McGregor from the Center for Oral History, as well as Micah Mizukami for his administrative support.
Yes, thank you so much. Can we get a little applause here? Little shout outs in the chat. Our event co-sponsors, of course, this isn't new, right? They've been doing this work. They've been orienting all of our scarce university resources to nourish our grassroots movements. And we'll be lifting up some of the good work that they have already contributed to in animating the legacies of Kokua Hawaii. So thank you so much. So before we welcome Uncle Liko, we want to provide a brief overview of our time together. Again, we hope everyone will be able to stay till the end, and we want to give a preview at the front just so you know what you can expect. Uncle Liko will welcome us with mele in just a few short minutes. Next, Gary and Merle Park will provide a brief overview and point of entry for folks who are maybe less familiar with Kokua Hawaii. We thought this would be productive. Some of you mentioned you just love history, and you saw this on a Facebook post or Instagram post, and you want to learn more. So we wanted to provide that kind of foundational, definition of what Kokua Hawaii was and why it's so significant, especially on this day, May 11th. But we'll spend the bulk of our time honoring what one of the registrants, one of you called our quote, early warriors, our OGs. So we have 3 panels today, as you can see here. And working with Kokua activists, we came up with kind of 3 themes or central questions we wanted to invite folks to reflect on. So our first panel will be reflecting on their personal paths to struggle. Next, we'll hear from a second group of activists thinking about the significance of Kokua Hawaii in 1971, why it mattered so much then. And we're gonna bring it home hearing from Rita, Kalama, and Kūʻike about the legacies of Kokua Hawaii and how that persists today. So just a brief note, on the kind of context informing these decisions. Given it's May 11th and we're celebrating a 50-year anniversary, our main priority was to provide a virtual space for kupuna to reconnect and remember, especially in times of COVID, right, that have kept so many of us physically apart. But as we were talking, and even in the short times we've been prepping for this event, we realized we also remember to reconnect, right? To build new relations, explore new ways of, again, lifting up the legacies of Kokua Hawaii. Whether that work happens locally here, across lands and seas. And, we want to lift up Palestine in our hearts and minds today as well, and connect, I think we're going to be doing some of that work as far as connecting, questions of occupation and dispossession and land theft here to Palestine as well. And last, we'll have Travis Thompson bringing us to close with his beautiful poetry. And so we thank you once again for making the time to be here, to reflect on some of the roots of struggle, and to deepen our ways of working together in the present. We know there are a few better ways, of course, than to spark some of this remembrance than music.
Yeah, so Uncle Liko Martin was 25 years old when he was arrested in Kalama Valley. He's a musician and songwriter for Hawaiian protest songs such as All Hawaii Stand Together and Waimanalo Blues. We're so grateful to have Uncle Liko bless us with a song today.
Okay. I came out of Waiahole this morning, Gwen, by the way, up there. And of course, I've been thinking about everyone and as I travel from place to place, some familiar and so much strange, to hear the ancient chantings of our home. As I listen to the stories, my eyes have seen the glories. So let us raise our voice in song to save our land. Within stone walls and cities of refuge, we learn the sacred ways. Upon the old valley floor, the ancient battles raged, and from the barren slopes of Kaululā and shores of Kalama Bay, we shall claim our lands from the barking sands to the valleys of Kamale. So all Hawaii stand together. It is now and forever. Raise your voices and hold your banners high. And we shall stand as a nation, guide the destiny of our generations, to sing and praise the glory of our land. From the fiery pit of Tutupele, I hear my mother's call. And oh, Tutukane and Mauna Kea says their love is more. Want to stand as one beneath the sun. Blessings from Haleakala and our sweet Kaulana, and way ale where the greatest waters flow. So Hawaii loa, Kūʻike kako, Kupa'a me kalokahi kukala me kami ole. Oni pa'akako, oni pa'akako, alana kila na ki'i eola, eola, eola na ki'e. So all Hawaii stands together. It is now and forever. Raise your voices and hold your banners high. And we now stand as a nation that guides the destiny of our generations to sing and praise the glory. To sing and praise the glory. Oh, to sing and praise the glory of our land. Oh, Kokua Hawaii. Right on, guys.
Oh my gosh, Uncle Liko, you make me so emotional.
It's emotional, yes. Oh, thank you, yes.
Yes. So if everybody, we give him a round of applause for Uncle Liko.
Well,
Hallelujah.
round, yeah, for everyone, for all of us, you know.
Yeah.
Hello, Lani. Mahalo, mahalo.
Mahalo. So if everybody out there, if you want to share your feelings in the chat, go right ahead. Like I was saying earlier, I was getting emotional. Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Let us take a moment to really appreciate how mele are these rich carriers of knowledge. Mahalo again, Uncle Liko.
By the way, just a footnote to that song. It was I was going back to Honau now, and I let Don Hono, who was really close during the support Kaululā, and he asked me, he said, "Liko, leave us something before you go." 4 hours later, I wrote that song. I took it down to Don Ho, and you know, he supported completely this journey. And so for all the spectrum of the people that he touched, that he represented here in Hawaiian Islands and embraced this aloha and aloha of our land and our people to all the people of the world, that shows you how wide the spectrum is. Then to never forget about all of the people and aloha. Yeah. So, you know, yeah, it's emotional. It's wonderful to see your faces and things. And yeah, my gosh, you know. Well, here we are, 550 years. Now a new beginning. Now we have our hand, you know, 50 years for us to find out the four corners of our world. I think we know enough about the situation what we're dealing with now. So for the next 50 years, Kokua Hawaii is to bring Hawaii back to Pono, you know, where all the people truly can appreciate each other and where we live. We can, that's our task, you know. We have a full hand now. It's like the Kaululā, 5 people went to Kaululā. The numerical significance of the number 5 is that it's very difficult to hold things. Like I've been working in the lawyer and stuff, couple of fingers give out. Wow, man, how, wow, all of a sudden I'm a little short. But in the 5th decade of which we are now is the time when we will grasp a whole of be able to grasp and lomi and work and kanu and plant and, use the whole of our being in expressing what it is we all carry, being keiki-o-ka-ʻāina. Keiki-o-ka-ʻāina. Kanaka, keiki-o-ka-ʻāina, you standing on the lepo, you just became a kanaka. Patsy Mink, of all the people that I ever met, Patsy was always there at the rallies. And a significant thing that she said when she was asked to come before Senator Noy in the hearings in Washington was about the issue of, the political situation in Hawaii. She noted that it was really not for her to speak in the Senate, but since she was invited, she said, this is an issue dealing with the Kanaka, and that the people needed the time to talk about things by themselves. And when the people gonna say, this is what, when they've had their time, just then it's for the rest of the world to respond to it. So we have a great opportunity. We have we're whole being now. We're just shedding our old skin. So we're very vulnerable. And in that metaphor, we have to shed some skin, and but to do it without bleeding and protecting each other. So, anyway, aloha to everybody. Yeah, so nice, gosh. Especially on Waihole. Oh man, I think about all the guys. Holy mackerel. Okay, aloha. Thank you for allowing me to be here and to share my mauhan, the prayers and the dreams. Keep it going.
Mahalo again, Uncle Liko and Lalani. Thank you so much for joining us today. Leala, you ready?
Yes. So before we're going to move on to our panelists, we'd like to turn to Gary and Merle Pak, who will help us in situating Kokua Hawaii and May 11th.
Gotta remember to unmute. My name is Gary Pak, and
hi, I'm Merle Pak. I was a teenager during Kalama Valley and passed out leaflets.
I was in college, but I'm Gary Pak, and more recently, Professor Emeritus of English at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. When I came back from college back in the 70s, I joined the movement, so-called, we call it the movement here in Hawaii, activism. I'm also the director and co-producer with my wife with the documentary Huli, Kokua Hawaii, and the beginning of the revolutionary movement in contemporary Hawaii. And so, I was asked by Ethan and we were asked by Ethan and Leala to just give an introduction about these things like that. And so one of the things that I just want to say in Kokua Hawaii, which was Kokua Kalama before, then became Kokua Hawaii, it was a multinational organization. And it was one of the first land struggles and I could be wrong, but I think that I am, close to being right, in over 100 years. That's not to say, oh, sorry. That's not, I'm shaking the table. I'm so excited to be here. It's not to say that Hawaii was not a hotbed of activism. It was activists, there was so much activism here, a lot of strikes and plantations and so on. 1910s, 1920s, there's all these strikes going on. 1920 Oahu strike, 1924 Hanapepe strike, which Rick Catania is working on right now. 1938, the Hilo strike and massacre And one of the leaders was Harry Lehua Kamoku. And in the 1946 Hawaii sugar strike. And so there was all this activity, and then there was a lull, you know, in the 50s and early part of the 60s. And then came Kalama Valley, you know, where people stood up, you know, and of course there was a lot of influence, you know, coming from national organizations like the Black Panthers. Larry Kamakavivoli in his interview, his oral history interview we did, was talking about being really good friends with Bobby Seale, the leader of the Black Panthers, his connection with the Young Lords, a Puerto Rican organization, Ewar Kewen, the Asian American organization. There was all these things going on. I mean, it was like tremendous, the late 60s and stuff. And many of us older guys, older people, we knew that. You know, we remember those times and stuff. So what happened with Kalama Valley was just like, wow, everything, like Kalani Ohelo was saying in his interview in the video, that, you know, things, you don't know what happened, but things just got together. And it was just all this, you know, things were working together. And finally, you know, a lot of the local people, you know, just got together and make the resistance and joined forces with the farmers and other workers in Kalama Valley of all nationalities and stuff. And I just wanted from here, I know I'm going over 3 minutes already. So I just want quickly that it opened up a lot of Kalama Valley, Kokua Hawaii, opened up a lot of possibilities, a lot of visions and viewpoints of how to make this change, how to go against injustice, and how to really make this more of a world of humanity. For example, you know, there was the reform movement of, you know, we're going to work within the system, the Kan. Kokua Hawaii, Larry Kamakavivoli and Gwen Kim talks about how Kamehameha School, after Kalama Valley was transformed, you know, it got more into the community research, outreach programs and stuff where it wasn't before, you know. There was all these sort of working within the system kind of thing, but there was also other things, like there were revolutionary trends and such, you know, nationalist revolutionary tendency. There was also, you know, socialist, communist, Marxist kind of looks at views of how we can change the world, you know. Again, you know, here, and there's a number of organizations here, I'll go real brief again, that that happened here in Hawaii. You know, for example, there are newspapers, Hohana, some of you might remember Hohana, Revolutionary Worker, the bookstores. There was like the Red Flag bookstore, there was Modern Times, there was Revolution Books, and there was all these organizations. Right after Kalama Valley, there was this organization called the HRO, the Hawaii Revolutionary Organization and such. So what I'm saying, there's all these things about protect Kaululā Ohana. And then of course, all the anti-eviction struggles, you know, Waihoi Wakane, Ota Camp, you know, you name it, you know. And so I'm going to stop here, but this is where I'm going to get into a kind of a link to, I guess, Ethan or Leala for the trailer of Huli, because I think that they want to look at that, the trailer, as a kind of a, you know, a way that we try to you know, condense all this thing. It's hard to do it in 2 hours, but this trailer is for a couple of minutes. And again, you know, this movie, Huli, if you're a student, staff member, professor at the University of Hawaii, you can access it free on the library system. It's also available on Vimeo. So here's a trailer of Huli.
This legislature does not represent the people. This place represents a few handful of guys.
They had been moved from valley to valley to valley until the very last, Kalama was the last valley. And it was enough. People are saying enough. You know, it was a metaphor for what was happening in Hawaii. It was enough of kicking local people off the land.
While I was in seminary, I met Bobby Seale. He said, "Bro, Larry, I want you to go home and cause hell."
Pretty chaotic, you know, when we got there, the bulldozers had already started. But of course I didn't think about the pregnancy at that point.
What we had to do was to take a stand so that people could remember that, you know, and they could feed off of that and organize other battles.
You need to organize your communities. You don't want this kind of development in Hawaii. There's enough of that kind of development.
This was the most significant land struggle probably in 100 years. Sand Island, Oda Camp, Niumalu-Nawili, all over the islands.
So our job is to organize. Our job is to steer, help to steer the right one out towards independence.
From the very beginning, Kalama Valley was a multinational struggle. Same thing with Waihoʻole Waikane. It was organized on that basis.
We even were told that we couldn't fight against the military might of the United States, but we were willing. We were willing.
There's limited land in Hawaii. Don't let them develop it all.
Kalama Valley was a moral position.
I knew, and a lot of people knew at that time, whatever was happening was wrong.
Not a bunch of radicals, not a bunch of mainlanders, but leaders. And we came back, we became good and industrious revolutionary men and women.
We were willing to die. We were willing to die for what we believed.
Way beyond Hawaii, way beyond the shores of Sandy Beach to protect our aina.
This is only the beginning. We have only begun to fight now.
A better world emerge.
Right on. Mahalo, Gary and Merle, for giving everyone this opportunity to reminisce. Yes. To reminisce about such an adventurous time. For more information, do check out the full film of Huli and Gary Kubota's Hawaii Stories of Change. Ethan is going to paste the links in the chat. So whether you lived it or just learning about it like me, we can all agree that this was truly powerful and even spiritual. Mahalo. So since we're on this path of remembering the events of May 11th, let us not forget those that have given their everything to this movement. We're going to share a short clip from Huli, the Huli film. May we take a moment to sit in peace and honor those that have returned to our ancestral plane, to Po. And as we're remembering our past Kalama Valley heroes, we want to invite all of you at home to share any thoughts or memories into the Zoom chat so we may lift up their important contributions. And here are additional names that we should also keep in our hearts who have passed since the production of Huli. If there are any other names that you are thinking of and have not been mentioned, please take this moment to type it in the chat so we may honor them as well. So now let's get to our first of 3 panels. For our first panel, we asked Kokua Hawaii activists, why did you get involved and what led you to join Kokua Hawaii? Our first panelist is Gwen Kim. She was a member of Kokua Hawaii who helped with research and outreach to a number of communities fighting evictions. Together with her late husband, Soli Niheu, Auntie Gwen fed and housed the movement. The Niheu-Kim Hale became the center of dozens Kokua Hawaii meetings. Auntie Gwen is also a retired social work administrator with Queen Liliuokalani's Children's Center and has been called the mother of Onipa'a Na Hui-Kalo. Then we have John Witeck. He was a part of the activist community that supported the anti-eviction struggle in Kalama Valley. Witeck was a founder of the Students for a Democratic Society at the University of Hawaii Manoa, Youth Action, and also founder and executive director of the Hawaii People's Fund, a nonprofit that works to provide material support for groups seeking a social change. He continues to work as a part-time instructor and lecturer at Honolulu Community College. So let's give a round of applause to Auntie Gwen and John.
Auntie Gwen, you gotta unmute yourself. You see the button in the bottom right.
Okay.
Hey,
Hey, Gwen.
Yeah. Hi. And I'm not going to do no comments because I don't know how to do that. And I don't want to lose everything. I don't want to touch anything and screw it up. So, but John, can you please do the honors of going first? John
I'll be
Witeck?
glad to. Thank you, Gwen. Mahalo to everybody. Good to see so many. Wow, over 100 people here.
Wow.
I came to Kalama Valley, an unusual path. I started out in a white suburban neighborhood outside Washington, D.C., was born one of 7 kids, went to a white Catholic school, almost all white, a white high school. I think we had one African-American student, and I went to University of Virginia then, which was mainly all white male. So it's surprising I got on this path. But luckily in 1965, or unluckily for the people of Selma, Alabama, there was an attack on people as they demonstrated. And Martin Luther King called for all people of goodwill to come to Selma. And so a bunch of us college kids and a few priests, ministers went down to Selma and joined the demonstrations. And it was just so moving to live in the Black community and work, march with the marchers. At one point, I got attacked by a white mob and hauled into a gas station, almost killed. Been afraid of white people ever since. No, but having survived that, I figured I have a lot of time to make trouble. So like John Lewis, who was there in Selma, I decided to make good trouble. I realized the problem wasn't with the Black community, it was with the white community. When I came to Hawaii, luckily I had read about the overthrow in Liliuokalani. So I expected to come here and see Hawaiians at the University of Hawaii, Kanaka Maoli, but hardly any faculty or students. And luckily I got to meet janitors and maintenance people who are Hawaiians. And I got involved in the union and went to union gatherings. And at one of them, I remember there was a band that played Hawaiian music, and I asked them to play Kaulana Na Pua. And there was just silence in the room. It's like, and the band said, okay. And they played it, and I noticed people crying. And one of the Hawaiian women came up and said, John, we don't usually ask for that, you know, in a gathering, but I'm so glad you did. So it helped to be a dumb howling. But it was, you know, I got a sense of the real feeling of many Hawaiians. In the summer, I worked in Waimanalo and met a lot of the Hawaiian youth, and they always put themselves down because they didn't speak the right kind of English, you know, Minnesota English. And I said, I love your pidgin. Pidgin is a higher form. It's like computerese today. You like dance, you got the age, etc. I said, I admire you. I want to learn that. But the kids were great, but they were oppressed by the police. They're always blamed and picked up for crimes. And I realized there was really oppression of the Kanaka Maoli community in Hawaii. I got involved from my concern about youth. We formed a group called Youth Action with church support. Youth Action gave grants. They were like the People's Fund for youth groups. And we funded all kinds of grassroots initiatives. But one of the projects we undertook was the Youth Congress. And we got we somehow we got $5,000 to pull it off. We had attracted 160 youth from 80 organizations. We met at Freer Hall, University of Hawaii, in over a week. And Kalani Ohelo was one of the inspiring speakers there, as well as people we brought in from the continent. But it was probably the first youth congress to vote to secede from the United States. So there's like a 3-to-1 vote. And also there's a very significant resolution Kalani Ohelo proposed to land for Hawaiian people. And this proposal passed this fairly broad youth group, and it called on the Bishop Estate lands to be given to the Hawaiian people. And a week after the Youth Congress ended, we read about the evictions of people in Kalama Valley. And so Kalani and me and other people said, we got to do something. So one day we got a call, I forget who I heard from, but we heard that the evictions had started. So I called my friend Lori Treshik and Linton Park, another friend. We went out there and we met Moose Louie, and Moose Louie said the cops were trying to, and the bulldozers were back in the valley. So this is in July 1970. So we could hear the bulldozers. So we get in the car and travel to the back of the valley. We'd see a house. It had all the furniture in it. It had people's belongings in it. And there was a bulldozer pulled up next to it, and Laurie and Linton and myself went into the house. We sat on the front lanai on the front porch, and the bulldozer was pulling ahead. Laurie was 7 months pregnant, so I felt a little guilty getting her into that situation, but she's a fighter. Anyhow, the bulldozer operator paused, and then this guy came up from Bishop Estate, Ed Michaels. And he's the jerk who later says the Hawaiian culture, way of living is illegal and should be illegal in this modern world. But anyhow, this jerk told the bulldozer operator, go ahead and knock it down. I'm telling you, knock it down. And so he gets back in and he drives it up to within a foot of the house. And he gets out, he throws the keys out into the grass. And he said, if you want to knock it down, you do it yourself. He walked away. And later, you know, within a day or two, the Operating Engineers Union voted that nobody will work in Kalama Valley because the people were still in the homes they were knocking down. So Lori, me, and Linton got arrested that day. I don't remember being prosecuted or fined or anything. I think because Lori was pregnant, we were spared. But after that, other people went there, including Kalani, and there were other arrests. And there was an occupation then for that year until May 1971 when people were arrested off the roof. After that, I just figured continue to make trouble and supported the Sand Island. I think I've been arrested in a bunch of community anti-eviction struggles and labor struggles. But Kalama Valley was really like Selma when I almost was killed marching with the people of Selma. Kalama Valley was another one of those things that really moved you, inspired you to give your life and to make good trouble. So I say, all Hawaii, let's stand together. Imua.
Imua. Thank you.
Me.
Yeah, thank you, John. And you know, one of the reasons, you know, you are on the panel is because of your 50 years of continual service to the community, you know, that you've done, John. And then some of the history that, you know, I've known you for so many years and I didn't know you was involved in that Selma stuff until I read the book. So that was fascinating to me.
Thank you,
so thank you. Thanks,
I admire
John.
you. And your children and solely.
Yeah.
Bless you all.
But I do want to say that another person, unfortunately, who wasn't able to make it on our panel is Jimmy Ng. And Jimmy and I grew up together in Kaneohe, right across the street from each other's kids. And he was very close with Soli. And he and Roseanne Ng were jumped off the plane. Soli bumped into them and said, hey, you like go Kalama Valley? And that became a life journey for Jimmy and Roseanne Ng, because they went into Kalama and they committed the rest of their lives to the movement. So I just wanted to acknowledge that for, circumstances, he couldn't make it, but he in spirit, he is with us and he always will be. So I'm going to do my part. And you know what? It was so hard for me because it's like our life, yeah. And so please excuse me, I'm going to be looking at some notes here. But when you ask what's our memory of that time, I'm going to say that we were on fire. We were on fire and the world was on fire. I mean, literally, the black movement in New York, they burned down blocks, and in Vietnam, the Vietnamese people were being napalmed. And to this day, they still have the residuals of that horrific, destructive war that we, 50 years ago, when we were bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and we thought we could win the world, But boy, for me, I was a country girl, and it just blew my mind because there was a confluence of conditions and consciousness that came together. And I'm going to say it's something like 50 years later, I'm so grateful that I am still alive and that I can walk. And even though I got pushed in a wheelchair, in Mauna Kea, that I lived to see Mauna Kea. That Mauna Kea was born out of Standing Rock. And then to see the Black Lives Matter movement. And so that I feel almost as though we're at another stage, that is quite similar to 50 years ago. And then at that time, we had the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, Iwo Kyun, and you know what? We were all so riveted to study. Remember, John, we're in study groups. Everybody was in study groups. And because we wanted to learn the science, hey, what is this science of the least can fight and win the most? I mean, there were things historically happening. I mean, just if you stand back, don't get scared by that word communism, but just think and look at what happened in Russia. They got rid of the czars. They got rid of their emperors. Wow. And they built a whole new society. And then same with China. China was, oh my God, it was so, controlled by the imperialists, and they overthrew it. With a long march, they overthrew that. But they did it through a scientific method of MLM. And I got turned on to that because, hey, I really admired the Panthers. And they really upheld MLM, Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought as an analysis. But because they became so dangerous, we know what happened to them. And we know what the system is capable of doing. So
Gwen, I'm glad you mentioned the anti-war movement because that also played into Kalama Valley. Kaiser was one of the big developers there, and Kaiser was also a big war contractor. So for the anti-war movement at UH, we were able also to get support by targeting a war profiteer and the Bishop Estate, a big landowner, who were connivance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. And what it really taught us was, it's like, instead of running around, trying to put out fires, we came to realize that there was a systemic nature to what was happening, and so like, for me, when I walked in to Kalama Valley, I did it. I was a community organizing social worker for the Legal Aid Society Model Cities program out of the 442 building in Waianae. And at that time, they had a big anti-poverty program. And when I was in Waianae, we fought development at Mana Lahi Lahi. And, you know, there was this, you know how that was at that time, John, there was just development rampant. They could do anything they wanted, you know, with their money and their power. So when you folks started doing it, organizing in Kalama, it called to me. And I think it was like, you know, how, what I call the silent poo. It's a poo, it's like, it's a sound, a call that goes out and you hear it. You hear it in your heart and you hear it in your mind because it speaks to all of those multiple experiences that you've had in your life. And so with my own little footsies, I walked into Kalama Valley by myself. And it was when the occupation had already begun. And okay, let me just look back to my, I just want to say, you know, I'm a country girl. You know, I was raised right next to a taro patch in Kaululā and right up the road from the Kalahikis, or, you know, back where Say Sirakaku now lives. And so a lot of this stuff is like, you know, I kind of kuʻaina from the Kuʻihidis. And so this was all like real blowing my mind experiences. But the one blowing the mind experience that I want to share is that when we had the war in Vietnam and people were on the move, I had a cousin named Nick Goodness. And he was part of, you know, when the Rotsi building got burned in the anti-war movement. Okay, so he got very involved and he actually organized a Concerned Locals for Peace. And it was because, you know, we as locals couldn't find an entree into SDS. You know, SDS was kind of a little closed group, but Concerned Locals for Peace got everybody on campus on the move against the war. And I remember he would stay with me, and I remember him, you know, when we first had the war situation coming up, and I said, I don't understand. Why don't we just go in there and blast the hell out of them and end this war? You know, I'll never forget the look on my cousin's face. And he looked at me. He felt so sad. You know, it was so sad. He was like taken aback, but he loved me. And he told me, oh, Gwenny, you have a lot to learn. You need to read some stuff. So he told me to read Hawaii Ponoi, and I read it. And oh my God, I never knew about the Big Five. I never knew about the overthrow. And I cried and I said, what the hell? All my life, I'm an adult and I never knew this stuff, you know. So that's kind of like part of my growth forward. And then I just gonna throw in one last thing. As a woman, when I walked in, Linton Park asked me when I was in there, you know, when we're all hanging out in the house and talking, he said, oh, Gwen, oh, how come you came? Cousin Soli. And I was so insulted. Of course, that was a sidebar thing that I was lucky I landed him. And, you know, I chased the okoli out of that beautiful looking Hawaiian man. But he wasn't the reason why I came into Kalama Valley. And I felt insulted. And, you know, I'm just going to say that hidden patriarchy continues to today, you know, and it's a benevolent, nobody means bad, but it's like Gary Kubota listing me as the wife of Soli Niheu. Still, I'm not my own person, Gwen Kim, but I am the wife of Soli Niheu. And I'll never forget when, what's his name? Oh my God. Oh, well, Okay, I forgot that, so it's not a story to be told now. So I think I'm Paul about my love for Kalama Valley. And I feel so honored and humbled to have been part of that historic struggle. And the friends we make together are lifetime.
Mahalo, Auntie Gwen. Can we get a round of applause for Auntie Gwen and John for starting us up? Thank you so much for speaking and sharing your knowledge and lived experiences with us. Thank you so much. Continue with the chat. We're so appreciative of the dialogue. We're trying our best with Zoom to have less a monologue and more some interaction with everybody. Just want to point out one thing, that we hear from Auntie Gwen and John. We join movements to be a part of something bigger, right? But we don't leave our individual stories behind, our individual differences aside, and our biographies, right? All complicated, all beautiful, right? Those can be productive bases of coalition. John, if you had more time, I'm sure you talk a little bit about your decision to leave the Valley, right? So it didn't center on your being a white guy, right? And the decisions to really front, in this case, quote, local people, right? And just, the work that we each got to do as well, especially folks like myself. So thank you for our first panelists.
Thank you, and thank you, Lee.
Beautiful. So now let's get to our second panel, which centers on the question, what was it about Kokua Hawaii that touched the hearts and minds of people across Hawaii in 1971? What made it spark? So our first panelist is Raymond Catania, who was among the 32 people arrested in Kalama Valley. Uncle Ray was a leader in Kokua Hawaii in charge of education. He also operated Kokua Hawaii's printing press on Palama Street in Kalihi, publishing brochures and protest posters, political and creative work that he continues today in solidarity with the working class movement. Then we have Gary Kubota, who was arrested in Kalama Valley on May 11th, 1971. Gary served for a brief time as a writer and editor of Kokua Hawaii's newspaper, Huli. He later became a Kokua Hawaii community organizer, helping to fight the eviction of the Filipino community of Ota Camp in Waipahu in 1971 to 73, and was a leader in the sit-in to preserve ethnic studies at the University of Hawaii Manoa in 1972. He's also serving as a volunteer researcher and liaison for tenants fighting an eviction from the Front Street apartments in Lahaina. Then our third panelist is Claire Shimabukuro, who was also among the 32 people arrested in Kalama Valley. She was a member of the steering committee of Kokua Hawaii and also served as a volunteer driver for the federally funded Honolulu Community Action Program, bringing van loads of eggs, milk, and bread at discounted prices to residents living in low-income housing. Shimabukuro later became a major force in the growth of the Meals on Wheels program on Oahu, and serving as an executive director, coordinating the daily delivery of meals to thousands of Hawaii people in critical need of essential services. So let's give a round of applause to Uncle Ray, Gary, and Claire.
Okay, I've been asked by the organizers to be the martinet and keep everybody under control, to which Ray laughed. You're gonna be the one to control us, we gotta control you. But because we have only 5 minutes, I'm going to read what I've written, because if left to my own devices, I'd ramble on and on. So the first thing I'd like for all of you to do is close your eyes. Close your eyes. Imagine with me the valley behind Sandy Beach, as uncluttered by houses, accessible by one road only. Dry, but with the occasional kiawe tree and tall California grass. Sparsely populated by scrap metal dealers and pig farmers who had been evicted several times from Waialae and eastward, every valley, but who welcomed all into their homes. Imagine spring 1971. Situation: no internet, no cell phones, no desktop computers in every household, no CDs, no computer games. You had to organize people to people. You could walk, run, or ride bikes, feel the wind on your body, feel the wind on your face, body surf at Sandy's. For entertainment, you all sang and played instruments, backyard changalang, or if you were soli niheo, you'd get up and dance a naughty hula at moment's notice. For communication and defense, a guard shack at the front of the valley and walkie-talkies. Remember, no cell phones. Tents pitched at the house of George Santos for activists to sleep. For food, planting fledgling vegetable gardens and collective donations. Now picture this, in the interest of huge corporate bucks, the Bishop Estate landowners and their developer buddies, such as Kaiser, were bulldozing houses with people in them at this last stand valley. Profits over people. Now imagine this. We occupied the valley to support pig farmers and scrap metal dealers, mostly Hawaiian in 1971. It was the first contemporary organized protests, but it stood on the shoulders of Makainana rebellions throughout the centuries, struggles to support Queen Liliu in the late 19th century, immigrant worker rebellion against plantation bosses, and union battles of the 30s to 50s. People, not profits. And Gary, I might add, Gary Pak, that the reason there was a gap was because Joseph McCarthy, all of the activists, the unionists, the social, and persecuted them, and then they turned COINTELPRO, the Black Panther Party. Here is the world situation, and this is why Kalama Valley is significant. In 1971, the United States invasion of Vietnam was raging, and the Vietnamese were fighting back, and they would eventually be victorious. US military bases and presence were very active in Hawaii. Asia, Africa, Latin America had for a decade exploded to throw out brutal colonizers and fell victims to USA, CIA coup d'etat, or were victorious in kicking out corporate European or US colonizers and their local puppet dictators. In the USA, at the same time as the Kalama Valley struggle, VVAW, Vietnam Veterans Against the War, organized a massive anti-war rally in May and threw their medals away on the steps of the US Congress in Washington, DC. We ain't gonna fight a rich man's war. Struggles in the US were led by people of color, primarily the Black Panther Party. Larry Kay of Kokua Hawaii had been at Divinity School at Berkeley, and Bobby Steele, Black Panther chairman, spoke to Larry's class and they became friends. So Kokua Hawaii participated with the Black Panthers and went to their Congress. We went to their conferences in Oakland. The Panthers, with massive community programs, free breakfast for the community, medical care, sickle cell and anemia testing, defending their communities against police brutality, were a vanguard of social service and social justice. AIM, the American Indian movement, started by the Belcourts, Russell Means, and Dennis Banks, had started its occupation of Alcatraz to demand Native American rights, led by John Trudell and Lanata Means in 1969, and they ended it in 1971, a month after the Kalama arrests. AIM came to Hawaii and stayed in our neighborhood in Kaululā, near our Kokua Hawaii collective house. We also had relationships with the Puerto Rican Young Lords Party in New York, Ivor Kuan, the Chinese group in San Francisco, the Black Workers' Council in Detroit, Rising Up Angry, a white working class youth group in Chicago who were part of Panther Fred Hampton's Rainbow Coalition. All of them were involved in revolutionary struggles for justice and community social service. We were allied with them. They came to Hawaii and we visited them. And in Cuba, where in 1959, Fidel Castro's revolutionary nationalist movement emerged victorious and kicked out the corrupt Batista, whose Cuba served the corrupt US mafia and exploited the island with tourism, forcing people into prostitution and poverty. Well, the people suffered and they were tortured and killed if they did not go along. During our occupation, Kokua Hawaii members went to Cuba as part of the Venceremos Brigade to cut sugarcane and express solidarity with the Cuban Revolution. Previously, a Kokua Hawaii member had gone on an earlier brigade, and Fidel Castro himself said to her, "When you kick the US out of Hawaii, I will come and help you cut cane." We went on to participate in other struggles, and Ray and excuse me, Gary will follow up with this. Ota Camp, Halava Housing, Waihole Waikane, Chinatown, Kona, New Malu, on Kauai, Ethnic Studies. We all gained organizing skills, which are ultimately important because you can have all the ideology in the world, but only organizing makes change. And no matter what our intentions to inform, it's our ability to inspire and to love the people, which will win hearts. Personally, I was 18 years old when I helped to found Kokua Kalama. I had been an anti-war activist in my youth, but Kalama Valley was a watershed for me. I have since always applied organizing strategy and tactics to community work here, to work in Chicago in Wildcat Strikes, organizing against white supremacy there, co-chairing a National United Workers Organization, at the Hawaii People's Fund, and the first civil disobedience arrests in this millennium at Waikiki Hotels as the local 5 union community organizer, at Hawaii Meals on Wheels, and as a delegate to the Peace and Demilitarization Conference held in Guantanamo, Cuba. Ray will talk about detail and Gary will talk about more details. So I will end, since we're talking about our solidarity with Cuba, with Che Guevara's statements that we must act always on behalf of the masses of people against oppression with highest integrity, always with love, and always not as an individual, but as part of a collective. Hasta la victoria siempre, until victory always. And of course, huli kako, together we will overturn. Raymond.
Uncle, you got on mute.
Hi. Okay, you got them on mute already. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, everybody so far. I'm going to try to be as short as I can. To my family, that's impossible, but I'm going to try, you know. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I'm wearing an HGA hat. I'm a proud member of the HGA, but I don't like the idea that the leader of the HGA telling the teachers that they can have that bonus. That's a bunch of baloney. I think the teachers should get everything that they can get. And if anything, you know, the union should be fighting for everybody, to not just the members, but the whole working class to get something, you know. And for me, it's really important because I believe in solidarity and uniting the whole working class, no matter what job you work, what race you are, what gender you are. You know, workers, we support each other. And I know John Witeck supports that as well. And he used to be a member of my union, you know, as well as United Public Workers. Okay, to get that out of the way, it was really easy for me to join the struggle and support the struggle in Kalama Valley. It's a significance because I already was an anti-imperialist, a young protester against the war in Vietnam, who understood that Hawaii was a launching pad, that the lands in Hawaii was stolen from the Kanaka Maoli to kill and oppress other people in other countries like the Vietnamese. So the link for me was really, really clear. So that was my internationalist duty, I felt, in my humble way of looking at things. And still to this day, I believe that struggle in Kalama Valley was also a fight against the rich people all over America and all over the world. And so that was the significance for me. And to carry that thing a little bit further, I like to do political posters. And I get this one over here. If you guys like one copy, ask me May 11, 1971 at gmail.com. You give me your address, I'll go send one copy to you. In this particular poster, I give credit to those who are organizing at the top of Mauna Kea, you know, in their fantastic use of nonviolent civil disobedience. They carried it really well. And I want to give the fighters against the TMT a lot of credit. And on that poster, I talk about the Hawaiian activists who were fighting in those days to organize the working people. Like I talk about Harry Kamoku. Harry Kamoku was the first Hawaiian labor leader to organize a multinational strike of people in Hilo Harbor. He brought all people of different nationalities together and they shut down that harbor. That was called Bloody Sunday. Kalama Valley was another struggle, that I was involved in. But Kalama Valley influenced Waihoʻole Waikani. Waihoʻole Waikani, it influenced a lot of other struggles, like one I was involved in Kaliʻipalama, called the Census Tract 57 struggle, named after the little census tract that I was in. We followed that struggle of what happened in Kalama Valley, and we supported other movements like Waihoʻole Waikani and Heiʻikea. That struggle in Kalama Valley was like a single spark that started a prairie fire all over the islands. People were organizing and fighting back against eviction and fighting against landlords like Bishop Estate and the other landlords that rule Hawaii till this day. And so Kalama Valley, it was like a match, like a spark, that got the thing going. And we should all remember that. Just because they talk about Hawaiian culture at Kamehameha School today doesn't hide their dastardly past of the crap that they had done kicking Hawaiians off the land. We got to let these guys know the truth of what happened to the Kanaka Maoli, and don't let guys like the Bishop Estate get away with it for the crimes that they committed. So I talk about it in this poster. If you like get this poster, you mail your address to me, May 11, 1971. I get another poster of one of my best friends, Soli Niheu. And the reason why I did this was a commemoration for him when he passed away, because I couldn't go to the Big Island for his ceremony. And he got arrested, I don't know how many times, dozens of times, fighting against evictions and fighting about the desecration of the Hawaiian people and their culture. I call him a fearless Kanaka Maoli independence warrior, community organizer, internationalist, and revolutionary. Solely understood all over the world who people are fighting for social justice. He wasn't just thinking about Hawaii or Kanakas. He showed his solidarity to people all over the world. This other poster that I get, let me see, shall I tell you guys, is on Kalama Valley itself. If you guys like this poster, do the same thing. Contact me, May 11, 1971 at gmail.com. This right here details the 3 evictions that happened. The one that John and Laurie was involved in, and then leading up to the last one that we had when the 32 of us got arrested. You like one copy of this? You contact me. So all this information I've been keeping down. This is the significance of the Kalama Valley struggle. And I've been trying to record it in my own simple way as a basic historian, what the hell went on. And so I'd like you guys, if you want to learn more about these things, let me know. And I will send you some stuff. I'll send you some information, and I will get this poster out to you. So, one thing that I like deal with, we hardly talk about it, but I will. And it's the racial question of the Howleys being told that they should leave Kalama Valley because we were afraid that they was going to steal the thunder and get the spotlight and try to control the situation. I remember John Kelly was the one who talked to the Howleys and told them that they had to leave because the local people got to control the situation. And I was the one who would talk to the locals that the Howleys had to go. It was kind of hard. But anyway, over the years, I thought about that decision. And this is my personal opinion now. I think it was the wrong thing to do because an oppressed people have the leadership, have the know-how, and we have the understanding to control our own future, and we shouldn't be afraid of allies and others trying to move on in and taking over the battle because sure as hell, we can take care of it ourselves. And I just wanted to bring that up. That is my personal opinion. Some people may see it differently, but that's the way I look at it. As a person who's involved in working class struggle, I go across racial lines to unite as many people as possible to defeat the common enemy, which is the capitalist class. So, that's all I gotta, that's all I gotta say, I never swear too much. I'm proud of myself on this thing, but I tell you, brothers and sisters, if you guys like more information, what happened with Kalama Valley and other stuff that's happened in Hawaii, and if I'll share that with you. Also one more thing. I didn't bring it with me today, but I have a history of Harry Kamoku, who was the first organizer, Native Hawaiian Kanaka Maoli organizer who was able to bring all the races together to win, because he had the cultural understanding of family, of ohana and unity. And he helped to bring the working class together. And by doing so, it opened up the doors to the organizing of the ILW and organizing sugar workers and organizing plantation workers and organizing workers on the docks. So, brothers and sisters, I hope I never talk too long, but
Uncle Ray.
Okay, thanks, sir.
We got, thank you, Travis. Yeah, so it's the April 8, 1918 Gmail, I think, that Uncle Ray uses more. So Gary, I'll turn it over to you and we'll come back. We'll make sure we connect you with Uncle Ray. Oh, Gary, you got to unmute yourself.
Just like to say what Ray and Claire said, I'd like to thank them for saying. The basic reason why I got involved was I was basically a conscientious objector working for the American Friends Service Committee and United Church of Christ, going to schools. After the Marine recruiter would give his talk, I would come in and I would show all the oil wells offshore in Vietnam and the real reason why we were there. To strike a balance. And in terms of Kalama Valley, I felt that a balance needed to be struck. I was at the University of Hawaii. I dropped out, but I noticed that there were very few Hawaiians, Filipinos, and not as many Japanese that there was a proportionately in the population like that. A lot of them were going as soldiers. The boys are going to Vietnam. And these are the people who are being evicted. At the same time, these ethnicities were being evicted. And I just thought it was horrible because a lot of people didn't know, but I'm a researcher. At the time, there was a study back in the late 1960s called Public Land Policy in Hawaii, and it said that 93% of the land in Hawaii was owned by 100 entities. 93% of the land owned by 100 entities, including the state and federal government. That's how concentrated land was in Hawaii. And that was why there was very little control over people or very little respect for the minorities being evicted. And there needed to be a balance struck. And at the time, there may be 5 locals like Asians, Hawaiians who were news reporters at the local newspapers statewide. There were virtually no local people on TV like that. So Kokua Hawaii's job in this particular instance was to help these communities have their voice. And that meant we had a newspaper called the Kūʻike. We had people like myself and others who knew how to write press releases, who knew how to run mimeograph machines, who developed telephone trees so that various community members and coalitions could be formed. And as a result of that, and our successes early, people began to call us up. After Kalama Valley, we lost at Kalama Valley, but they called us up. Several communities asked for our help, and several, like in Oda Camp, they invited us actually to live in the camp itself. And I lived there for about 3 to 6 months, along with 2 other people, and helped them get a poster going. The poster that you see is a poster that we shot of while we were at Oda Camp to humanize the situation, to give people hope and dignity, and to respect minority cultures. And this was what it was all about, and listening to them, finding out what they wanted. We would have these meetings, and the first thing we ask is basically, what do you guys want? And then they tell us what they want, and then we try and work with them on it. We had our own separate beliefs and individual beliefs, but the primary reason why we were successful is because we listened to people. And we also stayed by them, like George Santos. Ray and Claire didn't mention, and even Gwen didn't mention, but after George Santos got evicted, I mean, each one of us would wake up about 3 o'clock in the morning. We had different days, and George would come and pick us up, and we would ride with him, and we'd go and pick up the slop. we'd go and help him up at his new pig farm in Pearl City, and we helped him cook the slop and then clean the pans, and we did that, not over a year like that. And so these are when I was in Oda camp, when we were invited to go there. There was an abandoned shack where we had to chase the dogs out, actually. There was no electricity, so we ran a wire, one light bulb to a hot plate and to a light. And we showered using a water hose in the morning like that. And I got a job at Pearl Harbor Volkswagen in Waipahu, so I could be close to Oda camp. And that's when we began to work at developing. We had a media event, and then we had press releases, and we had the poster. We published a poster that had more than hundreds of posters, and we raised money with the posters. So these are the details that we talk about when we say building a movement. And then when it came to ethnic studies, we called all the different communities that we were helping. And we said, we need your help because ethnic studies is a think tank for us. They're the ones who do the research a lot of times. And we need to preserve ethnic studies. And they came from Kahalū, from Heiakea, Buddy Ako, Randy Kalahiki, from Ota Camp, Pete Tagalog, from Census Tract 57, Virgil Domain, Chinatown. They all came and they occupied the building with us. And that's how you build a movement. And the movement grew until 1974. Waihoʻoli, Waikani had a march like that against, against evictions and to preserve housing. And Uncle, Ray was a part of that much more than, I was. And so I'd just like to thank everybody for listening and coming today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we clap it up? I'm so fired up right now. Uncle Ray, Gary, Auntie Claire. Let's clap it up for our panelists. Please shout them out. There's a really important conversation happening in the chat that we're also trying to follow. Leala's doing a great job documenting this. But just a few things we want to point out before we move to our third panelist, right? So Auntie Claire talked about this as a watershed movement and a watershed moment as well. And Uncle Ray keeps nudging us to read our Lenin, right? A working class struggle. And so we've been trying to do our reading and a line that sticks out to us when we think about May 11, 1971. Lenin said, there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. And for us, it really seems like this is one of those weeks where, where decades happened. It seemed to unfold so rapidly. But it makes me think too, I'm trying to follow this chat, the decades passed and we're still walking wounded, right? We're still asking these same questions. So I think Laurel and Kalama lifting up some really important questions around it. How do we confront, misogyny and sexism in our movements, as Auntie Gwen helped lift up? How do we, not reproduce the harms that we're trying to oppose? So no easy answers, a lot of work to do, but thank you so much to our second panel. Let's give another quick round of applause. Thank you again. And back to you, Leala.
Beautiful. So our final panel, we wanted to talk about Kokua Hawaii as this active story. We asked panelists to reflect on what is the significance of a 50-year-old struggle today. So our first panelist is Dr. Kalamaokaʻāina Niheu. She is a Kanaka family physician and associate medical director for COVID response and at Lifelong Medical Care. She is also the co-founder of the Standing Rock Healers Council and the Mauna Medic Healers Hui, and physician for Onipa'a Na Hui Kalo, a Hawaii-wide coalition for the revitalization of native Hawaiian traditional kalo farming and food sovereignty. Her published works include The Impact of Military Presence in Hawaii on the Health of Na Kanaka o Maoli, Era of Climate Change Crisis and Standing Rock Violence and Militarization of Police. Then we have Rita Kalahiki-Weathington. Raised in Kahaluu, Kaneohe, Rita is the daughter of Kokua Hawaii activist Randy Kalahiki, who is the director of the Key Project, a community-based organization that aims to serve low-income youth from Kualoa to He'eia. Also, as the niece of Sam Lono, she and her siblings became wrapped up in a movement. She shared with us, "This is where I met great role models such as Gary Kubota, Auntie Gwen Kim and her husband Solini Hill, Uncle Larry Kamakaviva Ole, Uncle Pete Thompson, Lori Hayashi Treshut, John Witeck, Uncle Raymond Catania, as well as my Castle High School counselor, Mrs. Katehara, and the many high school teachers who knew my dad was and not afraid to call our home if I stepped out of line." These relations moved her to obtain a Hawaiian Studies history degree from UH Manoa to help educate the next generation of what she had experienced and wouldn't change a thing. Then our third panelist is Kūʻike Ohelo-Kamakea. Kūʻike is a farmer, fisherman, community leader, and activist. He has helped to lead the struggle at Puana to protect Iwi Kupuna, where he also works to feed his community through food, cultural song, and sustainable relations. So let's give a round of applause to Kalama, Rita, and Kūʻike. Woo!
Lahaina. So shall I respond first to the question? Okay, great. So what is this legacy of Kalama Valley? What is the light that rose over the horizon of a history of a long period of suppression and oppression of our history as a people, both as Kanaka Maoli, but also as local people? It was a light that came over the horizon, and like the dawn, it illuminated so much. There's so many stories that were suppressed that we didn't know about. The magnificence of what happened with the Kuʻe petitions, the international diplomacy that happened with the Hawaiian Kingdom. The first one of the first print newspapers, an early 99% literacy rate, nationalized healthcare, arguably the first constitution that that enshrined human rights and non-discrimination and non-racism. We didn't know those things in the 1970s. Yet people knew that something was wrong. People knew that the progressive removal and evictions and land clearances were wrong. They might not have known about that, but that legacy still lived. And it lived in the people and the land itself. So for me, I feel so grateful and lucky to grow up with people like my mom, Gwen Kim, as a mother, my father, Solini Hill, and people like Uncle Pete Thompson, Papa Kikuni Blaisdell, Kawahine, I can see your names over here, learning from Kyle Kajihiro about demilitarization, Auntie Merle and Uncle Gary. We have so many people. I can't even list all the people because they're like stars in the sky. Each point bright and unique and beautiful. And I don't think I would have been the person that I am right now if it wasn't for each and every one of them out there. And I've been really blessed to believe that I could shoot for the stars because my mom and dad told me so. They told me I could be anything I wanted to be. And they loved me so hard and so deep. But they also invested me with a responsibility of kuleana. They gave me a name, Kalamaokaʻāina, to honor the memory of this incredible struggle that we're talking about right now. And that's a really heavy kuleana. I mean, no pressure, right? No pressure, right? So, and I think that that's something that I've always kind of thought about. And I for a long time when I grew up, I thought everybody was like them. Everybody was like a Bobby Seale. Everybody was, there was that everybody was a Hanani K. Trask. That everybody, these were the people that were the standards. And then I went to school, and people made fun of my name because I was one of the few people that had a Hawaiian name and a Korean name. and no English name because I'm not English. So there was a period of time when I felt that burden. It was really heavy. And I got a full scholarship to go away to school on the East Coast. And then I learned what it's like to live outside of the love of a community of courage and bravery and brilliance. And it's pretty freaking lonely and pretty awful. And people are cruel to each other. And many of them have never had dreams that are as bright and as brilliant and as burned so deep inside of their heart that it actually ignites a whole land, a whole movement, a whole history, so that it is so bright that it actually still shines half a century later. So I'm really blessed. You know, I'm really fortunate. The kuleana is hard. And, you know, I think one of the things that we don't really talk about is like what the price is for the things that we do. Because everything comes with a price, right? My mom told us once that she's not going to force us to do this work because the work is too hard. You have to choose it. So after a while of understanding what it was like to live out without this light, without this fire and this torch, I decided to come home and I decided to help do the work. And I didn't go into medicine because I wanted to always be a doctor. I went into medicine because I said, there are people that told me I can. People like Papa Kekuni. People like, you know, Papa Henry Hawaii. Auntie Margaret Machado. People told me I could do and be anything I wanted to be, no matter what people told me outside of the movement. And from that, becoming a kauka, I knew I had also partly a kuleana to bring this privilege into my community and to help as best I can, because there is no way I would be where I am right now if it wasn't for the alehele of the kupuna that walked before me. To never forget the mo'okuauhau of the movement. There would have been no Mauna Medicalers Hui without the Standing Rock Healers Council. There would have been none of that without Nuclear Free and Independent Pacific. There would have been none of that if it wasn't for this whole legacy of Waiahole Waikane and Kalama Valley. So I'm so grateful for this. And I think it's really important to the legacy that we're bringing forward. It's so many seeds. I can see it around with people like Kūʻike and Travis and so many others. I see Mickey over here. She learned from everybody out there too, you know. We're all students of this history and beneficiaries of this legacy. So what do I do to try to bring it forward? As I try to honor and recognize what is the history of land evictions and removals that echoes in Palestine along the Gaza Strip, the land clearances happening right now, being threatened right now in Palestine. What does that mean for me? It's the same story as Kanaka Maoli. Why do we threaten North Korea with nuclear Armageddon? Because they want to contain and utilize Hawaii as a military stronghold for PACOM. Why do we have a Standing Rock and the destruction of this whole planet with climate change crisis if it wasn't for the military being the #1 single consumer of fossil fuels in the United States? And what does Black Lives Matter mean to Kanaka, to us? To us. We owe them a duty because of Bobby Seale and the Black Panther Party. We owe an allegiance to the AIM. These connections have been made possible. We wouldn't have had any of those things if it wasn't for these alliances. So one of the things I would really hope to bring forward in this discussion is to honor the internationalism of the work that started in Kalama Valley and to continue it forward, to honor our ancestors of Kanaka Maoli, but also my Chinese and Korean ancestors too. And to realize the movement started as an international movement. And to while I honor the fact that my people are Kanaka Maoli, that the struggle always works best when we unite on the highest level possible. Mahalo nui.
Aloha. I like to pick up from where Kalama, but I'm gonna go ahead of Kalama. Yeah. So what I like to do, I like to tie up as to where I came, how I came to be part of the Kalama Valley or Kokua Hawaii. Back in 1971, I was 11 years old, a child running around in Kaululā at Key Project. My dad was Randy Kalahiki, director, founder of Key Project. He opened up Key Project to be my sisters and I, we like to talk about that Key Project was the home base of Kokua Hawaii on the winter side. And it was through that, it's how I would like to say, when I look at Auntie Lori, Gary, Uncle John, Auntie Gwen, those are all my, I would like to say my inspiration to further my education at 11 years old. So going through those struggles with Kalama Valley, it's like Gary was saying, or Uncle Ray was saying, Kalama Valley was the start, the fire, the explosion that started Waihole, Waikani, He'eia, Ota Camp, Chinatown. The movement was going on. So because of that, I was able to, it piqued my interest. And so through that, I decided that my dad was an 8th grade dropout, if nobody had realized. My dad was an 8th grade dropout, and he gave up his education to put his 2 younger siblings to school because he made a promise to my grandfather. Well, in the late 60s, early 70s, his mom, my grandmother, started an adult ed program so he could get his GED. So that's how, and see what my grandmother had done, what my dad has done, it made me appreciate my dad to further my education. And so when I look at it, that it was a starting step for me at Castle High School. And through all of that, I was exposed, totally exposed with all this good people in front of me to be what I am. And that's how I was able to go to college. So when I looked at Kalama talks about that she had to leave Hawaii to go to appreciate, to come back home. I wanted to leave Hawaii, but my daddy didn't want us to go. Because back in the 70s, he did not trust the mainland, of having a Hawaiian girl out there. So I said the next best is that I was not going to go to a community college. So I shot out right for UH Manoa. If I was going to go anywhere, it had to go to a 4-year college. And I strive for that. I really, really strive for that. And today, with everything that's going on, I teach my Hawaiian studies students home here in Molokai about the struggles that had happened past and what's going on today. It's how I live the future of what had happened. Yeah, so I still educate the students because I think it's very, very important for them to know what had happened and what is going on today. It's like she tied in what's happening in Jakarta, Asia or India, wherever you were seeing Kalama, that's happening on the banks. Yeah, we have a lot of struggles home here too. So that's how far I still educate my students. So I tell them I am the primary resource when I talk about things, issues that's happening home here. So I got tied in a lot, guys. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mahalo, anake. Velina e na hoa makamaka o kia honua nei. Mai ke one olino o ka ohau I na paliku o makapu'u. Ke aloha kaʻaina ia kākou pakahi a pau. Aloha kākou, he kama he kupa au no Kalani Ohelo Laua o Kawahine Kamakea. My name is Kūʻike, and mahalo le ala for the beautiful introduction. And I want to first mahalo anake Rita, good to see you. And cousin Kalama, ke aloha noa. Mahalo nui for sharing, mahalo nui for sharing. This thing about legacy, yeah. I just want to first start off by saying that my parents, especially my dad, never mentioned anything about Kalama Valley to myself or my siblings growing up. Everything that we know today is because we hear, we learn from everybody else around us. Yeah. My parents, you know, I honor them by speaking Olelo Hawaii, by Olelo Hawaii, because, I mean, if we acknowledge and look at Kalama Valley as the spark that ignited everything else beyond it, you know, mahope, and just acknowledging their kuleana and their sacrifice in the Olelo Hawaii movement as well. Eanoval, as Uncle Skippy says, I'm the evidence, not the crime. Mekela, today I'm a proud father and a farmer, and I truly believe that who controls the food controls the herd. Yeah, the reality is today, half a decade later, 50 years, is it's more hard for buy one house. It's more hard for buy land. It's more hard for live in Hawaii. Yeah, if Kalama taught me anything about, you know, what it means to be Kanaka, yeah, it means that application and execution, yeah, and just doing something, creating options for yourself. And I just want to make a note that I want to honor all the aunties and uncles today that are here today with us. And just want to remind the generation after us, yeah, that every day, every week, every month, we lose a part of our history. We lose a part of our momentum to attrition, yeah. We lose a part of ourselves to desensitization, yeah. We're so distracted by everything else. Kalama, my phone was ringing. We're so distracted by everything else around the world that we forget to do good. We forget to be good, yeah. So the legacy of Kalama Valley for me, yeah, has taught me that unless we make the conscious choice, yeah, unless we take the direct approach to determining what we're going to feed our keiki, to determining where we're going to live, how we're going to live, we're going to always be a pig in a pen. Kalama, my phone keep ringing. We're going to always be a pig in a pen, yeah, waiting for somebody else to figure it out for us. So the common thread for me, listening to all of our kupuna today, to all of our heroes today, is organization, kako. Unless we organize, nothing happens, yeah. Unless we apply ourselves, nothing happens. So to keep the honor and the legacy of Kalama Valley going, yeah, I challenge each and every one of us listening to this today, tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now. Get busy, do something. And if you don't know, go ask somebody, because that's how it is, yeah. Often we're too comfortable in our homes, in our jobs, in our lives, that we don't reach our full potential. And because we don't reach our full potential, we cannot meet, as Kalama says, on the highest plane. We cannot. So kako, einovawi kama'amau, here I am. This is Regulus Kako. I see you on the Aina. I'm very blessed to be invited to share. And Dad, love you. Kako, love you guys. Mahalo nui for your time. Ke aloha no.
Thank you, Kūʻike, Rita, and Kalama. Can we get some applause? Please write in the chat for this last panel taking us into the mandate, into the work to get busy. And Gwen, I want to invite you up to draw some through lines, recognizing that we're a little over time already, and I want to make sure we have time for Travis as well. And just briefly want to point out too, right? Something that comes out of this third panel is that all of this work, right, of anti-capitalism, anti-racism, it's not just a tearing down. What we hear, right, is so much of a building up and across, right? Kalama connecting us from Kalama to Waihola, to Standing Rock, to Palestine, right? And Uncle Larry, you know, Kamakawiwo'ole always insisted that Kalama Valley, you know, its purpose wasn't occupy, resist, and get arrested. It was occupy, resist, and develop. And that's where we hear Kūʻike's challenge to organize and get busy. So we invite you to continue this conversation. But Auntie Gwen, did you want to jump in and share any through lines before we turn to Travis?
She want to come out? Yeah, baby, go outside.
Auntie, you gotta unmute.
Okay, thanks. You know, I know I'm so anticipating hearing Travis, but I just wanted to say one thing that, you know, I observed on the panel that there were very few Kanaka in the present time and the OGs. And I just wanted to make note of this, that the Molokai study had found that there was something called the gleaning of the Hawaiians. And at a certain stage, they left. They weren't part of the equation anymore because they make. Okay. They went to sleep the summers and winters away too soon. So that is something that just, you know, hits my heart, that so many of these wonderful Kanaka leaders that were mentioned, they're not part of our panel today. And there's a reason. And so that's one thing that we must address, because Kanaka must live on. Okay, the health question, the emotional because of the trauma. And so that was very important for me, that I just wanted to mention about the gleaning of the Hawaiians. I think that's it. Wonderful, everything wonderful.
Beautiful, thank you, Auntie Gwen. So moving on, Travis will give us a poem. So thank you, Auntie Gwen, thank you, Travis. So Travis Kaululā Thompson was born and raised in Kalihi, Oahu, Honolulu, Oahu. Travis is a nationally ranked slam poet, spoken word artist, educator, pet owner, and professional teaching artist, MACC. Currently pursuing his MA at the Center of Pacific Island Studies at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. His research focuses on Polynesian oral traditions and looks at contemporary Hawaiian spoken word poetry as cultural social praxis. He is a co-founder of Youth Speaks Hawaii, Pacific Tongues, and the HI Poets Society, and also worked for 3 years as a raw vegan chef. So let's give a hand for Travis.
Aloha mai kākou. Thank you guys for having me. Can you hear me okay? All right. I just want to do 3 quick poems for you guys, and then we can close it out. This first one is a dedication to the Hawaiians that cannot be here today. And I wrote this 2 years ago for my father. And in the last couple of years, I've taken an interest in the Hawaiian genre of poetry known as kanikau, or of mele. And yeah, so I decided to write this for my pops, but this is also for, you know, Uncle Larry, Uncle Kalani, everybody, Uncle Sole. Been to a lot of funerals in the last 7 years, and it's been heavy, just losing people before, I don't know, I guess you're never ready. But anyway, it goes like this. It goes, kanikau from my old man. It goes, beloved is my companion, pops, dad, old man, Hawaiian. My dear father, Opi Kaululā Gustav Thompson of the Kalihi Valley Range. Where are you, Dad? Gone on the red path of Kanaloa? You leapt from the clouded shoulders of Vahila Ridge into the breaking dawn and passed into the realm of love lost beyond the horizon. There is rain on the plains of Ewa, from Kalama Valley to Waihole, from Waikiki to Makiki, from Kiwalos to Silver Channels. I go on, loving you, you who taught me storytelling and Marxist theory, you who taught me dawn patrol surf sessions and activist life lessons, you who taught me the value of family and community. There is rain on the plains of Ewa, and I go on loving you. Thank you. That poem is also for Auntie Joy On. My activist life or career or whatever, it began, I think, at Revolution Books, and of course it began with my parents too. I remember them taking me to different protests, and of course, you know, 1993 was a big year. I was 13 down at Iolani Palace, and but yeah, when I was after high school, I was involved with Refuse and Resist and different activist organizations putting on shows, concerts, and demos and protests. And I use that sort of experience in the nonprofit industrial complex, teaching poetry to kids because I'm into poetry. And this is the first poem, or the first, I guess, spoken word poem I ever wrote. And this is, I wrote this at Revolution Books, and it's because Auntie Joy On challenged me to, you know, write something meaningful, she said. So there goes. And I want to apologize because the language is not necessarily safe for work, but we go. It goes, when the shit hits the fan, on which side will you stand? Will you stand rough and tough in your boots, ready to blast another man? What if he's willing to kill and die for the state? He's paid in people's blood, putting food on his plate, or will you grab your Bible and try to talk peace when the temperature's rising around you like yeast and 10 loaves of bread? When the blood starts to spill, the rivers run red and cities will burn like ovens, cremate the dead, tons of ashes, the mass burial sites, while the war machine rages on through the night, all the way to the dawn's early light, and all the king's men try to hide and take flight from the fights and skirmishes, guns blast in the streets. The poor fight for a future while the rich try to protect the cash that they keep, but it's time for the meek to stand up and collect the earth, living wretched for generations in huts made of dirt. Meanwhile, the bourgeois never work, sitting in hats and mountains in their sweatshops, make the shirts to the malls of America. Capitalist homes for consumer hysteria. So keep your head and beware of the snakes in the grass and the birds in the sky. FBI agents scheming on ways to make our peeps die so our kids cry out with verbal weapons. Learn your lessons. Stop waiting for heaven. We want this world to be proper. Keep that Bible to yourself. Fuck the religion that you offer. Fuck the laws that you made for us that your cops can't even follow. Threaten us with death, but we're dying anyway. If your threats come off as hollow. We went through your shit. In your lies, we found the truth. You didn't want us. You wanted obedient workers, not intellectual minds. So now we're fighting this to create more of our kind, type of kid who desires to fire the mass. Revolutionary theory was taught to us in the streets, not in classes, but dark glasses rocked by the unknowing youth, shooting their eyes from the hard-hitting truth that the president and his boys have run this country for too many years, pacifying through shopping malls, drugs, and so I gathered revolutionary poets around a pocket full of shells to be, around a pocket full of pens to be put in hands just to write hymns of freedom. Because harmonious be the war songs we sing and filled with the truth in order to bring hope to the hopeless. Because revolution ain't pointless. So when the shit hits the fan, on which side will you stand? Point the strike with a rifle, not a Bible in hand, or will you stand when you sit on the empire's land? Because under the system, you're a slave, not a man. I say it's better to die fighting on your feet than to live on your knees. Because the only life worth living is a life that is free from the chains of wage slavery, which can never be broken. Until first the right slogans for people's war can be spoken, openly disseminated throughout the world's masses, a manifesto calling for the destruction of all classes, smashing like the shattering of champagne glasses, burning the empire into a pile of ashes. Because I'm tired of living life under these fascist pigs in their riot gear like bulls on parade. Protecting the oppressors who make us suffer and slaves. In the land of the free, in the home of the brave. I want vengeance for Shaka Thankpopa, who Bush put in the grave, because while he was alive, he wouldn't stay quiet. Even when they executed him, he was brave and defiant, but never silent, making statements that get repeated in riots, sparking thoughts that explode like when your mind was ignited, like when you saw something wrong and you decided to fight it. Revolutionary theory is useless unless you apply it. Thanks. So I wrote that when I used to volunteer at Revolution Books. You know, I think the Gulf War had just started maybe. I mean, obviously, I think Bush was president. And then I wrote this poem when I came down from Mauna Kea. And I actually went up there with a chapbook of my poetry and my students' poetry. And I went to Ho'okupu up there and taught a few poetry classes, or spoken word classes for the people up there. It goes, and haku mele means poem, okay? Or poetry, or poet. But haku mele, all right? So this that haku mele for Lahui poem. This that haku mele is the dedication for the Mauna Kea protectors who know it's an hour never standing in solidarity in the Va, they will not be moved. This haku mele is for all the trailblazing torch bearer kahu, lighting the path for Lahui, for our fathers who refused to be silent, for our mothers who never held their tongues, for our kupuna who were never compliant, for our indigenous brothers and sisters across Honua still fighting for the human right to have a homeland. This haku mele is for the kumu who taught us to speak our minds, Even if our voices tremor like the shoulders of Kilauea erupting into the sea, this hapu mele is for the kumuhula crafting mo'olelo into muscle memory. Through Oli, through Mele, through hula, this hapu mele thanks Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Jason Momoa for using their tightly toned abs and tatted star power to help spread the word of the 30-meter telescope, proof that some stars shine brightest when they humble themselves before Lahu. 2. This hapu mele remembers what white supremacy did to our islands, remembers how they used the military might to write themselves into our law books, remembers how they erased our rights as citizens in our own kingdom, how they used U.S. Marines to imprison our queen and overthrow our government. Remember, we had a government. Remember, we had a constitution. Remember, we had elections. Remember, they banished our patriots. Remember, they banned our language. Remember, they banned our newspapers. Remember, they tried to erase our culture. Remember, they did all that so they could steal all this as if they could ever win. Remember, they've been trying to erase Native peoples from their own homeland since day one, as if it was Howleys named the island Manhattan, as if it was Howleys that named the river Mississippi, as if it was Howleys that named the beach Waikiki. 3. This is that remember Leahi, forget Diamond Head poem. This is that remember Pu'uloa, forget Pearl Harbor poem. This is that remember Mauna Loa, forget Hawaii Kai poem. That yes, we're still angry poem. Yes, we're still grieving our losses poem. This that historical trauma is still felt in our bones not yet dead, our bones not yet buried, our bones not yet bulldozed or showcased in a museum somewhere in Europe. This is that poem. This that return what you stole poem. This that return what you think you bought fair and square poem. This that return the aloha you trademarked to sell your soy sauce poem. Return the aloha you sell with your fake ass mainland Haole style poke bowls poem. Return the aloha you sell on a Waikiki Blues Cruise catamaran poem. This that we are still here poem. On Mauna, preparing for the whirlwind, dancing in the storms of tomorrow, and chanting the names of our loved ones all the way back to Haloa, and each of them are chanting back to us, for us to remember, for us to remind ourselves, for us to know that this is also what we were always, and we will still be here. We, the Native people, Kanaka Maoli. We, the bone people, Kanaka Oiwi. We, the light in the crevice. We, sprouting from the seeds that Kupuna planted. We are the sails of the Hokulea. We are the pounding feet of every halau. We are what makes this place Hawaii in the first place. We are Mauna Kea, Kukia Mauna. Thank you, guys. I'm gonna mute myself now. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. I'm sure everyone is so fired up. Let's give Travis a round of applause. We hear the. Thank you so much, Travis. We see the chat going. We see the love and the reactions here. Thank you so much. The line that Kalama lifted up at the end of one of Travis's poems, the second one, right? Revolutionary theory is useless unless you apply it. Travis, I gotta say too, the way you read Hawaii Kai, the way you pronounced that was perfect. So we want to thank you again for spending your afternoon with us. We'll be honest, we kind of knew we were going to go over, so thank you for sticking with us. And we invite you to check out these links. Again, right, getting busy and doing the organizing work. Leala just pasted the links to Gary Kubota's Hawaii Stories of Change, where you can read about the oral histories, and Gary and Merle Pak's Huli, the documentary film. So we hope to continue the conversation. We know we can't condense 50 years into 2 hours. So we hope we can continue to be in touch.
Yes, mahalo for staying past our expected time, everybody. Now, for those that would like to stay in Vala'au, we would like to open the floor to our multi-generational Kokua Hawaii activists if they would like to further discuss the significance of Kokua Hawaii in 1971 and the Kalama Valley struggle. So as people,
Leala, I just wanted to really thank you and Ethan. Yeah, on behalf of all the OGs, for you linking up with us. And I think that combination of the youth with your help and us together, it was just very magical for all of us. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was
you guys
awesome.
That was wonderful.
They're wonderful. Wonderful. Mahalo.
Oh, mahalo nui for those words of affirmation. I appreciate it.